Well, welcome back to part 3 of week 2's Setting the Stage for Change. We have looked at how things have sort of set themselves up for a nation or people group, an empire to sort of rise to a modern sort of world and a way of lifestyle and living. And we've looked at why possibly some just didn't quite get there. So we have one more to go, and that is Europe and the New World. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So we want to go back and ask ourselves a couple of questions. Remind ourselves there are questions that are guiding our investigation. And then we're going to look at Europe and the New World in general. What are these questions? Once again, we've talked about this many times. How did we get from traditional to modern? Was it fast? Was it slow? Was it sort of out of some cultural explosion of some kind? Was it resource driven? Someone discovered something? What about technological advances? Why did some countries advance and others did not? And why, of course, why England? Why Western Europe? Why did this little itty-bitty chunk of the world, so small compared to everything else, why did it become such a powder keg and the central force of the 17 and 1800s? What happened? How did this divide of power and advancement and development, how did that happen? And why did it happen along those lines? These nations, these groups of people taking sort of a more traditional and not really changing kind of standpoint. The others taking perhaps more risk and actually advancing and sharing and exploding. How did that all happen? Well, we're going to take a look. So let's take a look at 15th and 16th centuries Europe, that little chunk of land up there. If you look at the map is like all divided up into little chunks. You have to like even squint to get up there to read all of the little lands and nations and groups and whatever you want to call them, little states that are happening. Now, probably the biggest one that's there is Spain and its influence in Italy, as well as in what would be called Normandy, I guess, or that Dutch region. England, France are there. Portugal is there. The Ottoman Empire, of course, is still there. To some degree, but look how divided that is. It's all everywhere. There's no unity amongst that region. It's just a bunch of strife and wars between all these countries all the time. Who's going to take this little piece of land? Who's going to take this piece of land? Who owns this? Who owns that? Et cetera, et cetera. So how does that situation, so to speak, how do you spell that out? How do you detail that? What is specific about all the European countries that are in that region? What are they all sort of facing in that region? That would be a question that you would want to ask. Well, every European country is trying to get more trade, more goods, more might, more power, more control. They're all trying to get up on one another. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've read about the wars, War of the Roses between England and France, these back and forth kind of deals. Or War of the Roses is more internal to England, but still, they were all cousins and marrying each other off, and just to gain control, just to get control of that area. So what do you do about that? If that's the situation, if that's the world that you live in Europe, then what kind of problems do you have? Well, you have limited natural resources. You're running out of things that you can pull or plant and farm and harvest out of your land. Your land is limited. And the more you plant, the more people that populate those regions, the more you need. More food, more resources, et cetera, et cetera. There's constant wars. People are battling and fighting all the time. That means it becomes very costly. So these kingdoms that are controlling these regions are losing revenue. They're losing money. They're using these monies to fight these wars. And so where are they going to get the money? Where is it going to come from? Are they going to tax the serfs They're going to tax the poor people a little bit more. Oh, that would be good for their economy. That's sarcasm, by the way. So obviously not. You got to find money elsewhere. You got to find revenue or a way of making and generating revenue some other way other than just taxing your poor people. But there's also this idea of growing trade wars. I'm not only fighting within my neighbors in Europe, I'm fighting them in India, in Southeast Asia. I'm fighting for control in the New World, et cetera, et cetera. But even though I'm fighting here, there's still huge opportunities to be gained in these other regions with natural resources and pulling back that raw product to build up my manufacturing and be able to sell and gain profits that way. So there's both opportunity and problems that are here. So what do we do? Here's European people groups deal. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this problem? I want more, but I don't have more. I want to keep away from the piracy on the waters so that I can have better trade, but I don't quite have that ability. So what does Europe do? I'll give you a hint. Do you get it? Okay. Yes. You have the discovery or the exploration into new worlds. Of course, they weren't looking for a new world. They were looking for a faster route to get to East Asia and Southeast Asia so that they could bypass all of the bandits and the pirates on the seas so they can get a faster route there called the Northwest Passage. But they ended up finding this huge, massive amount of land and massive amounts of resources, raw product. So by the early 1700s, let's take a look. I will give, or you can have a copy of this paper. I'll try to post it in the comments section or notes section underneath the YouTube video. But open it up, take a look at it, and just look at where people are landing. By the early 1700s, Europe was facing westward. Instead of looking towards the east, they were looking towards the west. They wanted, and actually, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this backwards. So if I'm Europe, here's Russia, here I'm Spain and France and England. I'm looking westward. I want to go that way, and I know the globe is round, so if I go that way long enough, boom, I can get back on where I want to get, where I want to reach. I want to get to that East Asia riches and those spices and things like that. So I'm going to go that way and see if I can avoid all of the mess and all of the hang-ups and challenges and problems here. So I'm going to go west. That's one of those situations, problems, opportunities, choices. Go west, I'm going to explore. So I go west and I find the New World. And that's what they did. So in this map, Spain and Portugal are shown. That's their territories. There's a little bit up in the British territory where the colonies would rest. But I'm looking more for Portugal, which is in the green, and then the purple, blue, lavender kind of thing, that's more Spain. But if you notice, if you go deep and you look up closely on these, the settlements are really scattered, and they're, again, only on the coasts. They're not penetrating inward. They're not controlling these regions. They're just sort of taste testing, so to speak. They're very, very small settlements. Even as you move, Spain moves into what is now the United States of America, even as they move up, there's very, very little settlement in that region. There are so few Spaniards in this general region. It's just not populated very much. In the north, this would be North America. You could see Florida hanging down there in the bottom. This would be in the early 1700s. You have, again, from the perspective of the colonies, which is on that east coast section, those folks, if you notice, see all the cities and all the things that all the settlements? Now just go a smidge inward. Go into the yellow. You see how scarce there is? There's not a lot of cities and towns and settlements in that yellow region, only along the Mississippi Valley. That there's a few scattered, but almost everything is right there on the east. Why? Well, because the colonists are looking eastward. They're looking back to Europe. That's the connection. Europe is looking to that eastern coast of the colonies, and the rest of the New World is looking back towards Europe. That's the connection. They're having this actually it'd be this way. So it'd be Europe and then the New World, and they want to build this. They don't want to go back around this area. They want to build this up because that's the new resources, that's the new revenue, that's the new money, et cetera, et cetera. That's the new opportunity. It's new land. They can expand. They don't have to stay on a little island anymore. How about this one? This is in the Caribbean. The Caribbean during this time is becoming the richest place on earth. You want to make a fortune, this is where you go. You could take a look at this map and kind of unravel it a little bit. It sort of shows when things in this region were settled by European settlers. And you can look at what are some of the major economic activities in this area. You have sugar. Look at all of the sugar. Sugar is the little open hole zero. Look how much sugar production is coming out of here. Or coffee. Coffee is another one. Guess what? Guess what happens when sugar is introduced back into Europe? People get cavities and they get an addiction to sugar. They didn't have sugar prior to this. They have things like honeys and stuff like that. But sugar, raw sugar is a new thing. It's something new. And if you want a market, you want people to come want your product, what better way to get them to come want your product than to make them addicted to it? And that's what sugar did. Coffee was another one. It did the same thing. It was like tea, only it was much more concentrated and got things going. So lots is happening in these regions, and Europe is now gaining all of that wealth. They're gaining the new resources. New markets, new opportunities are open up. We would call that new situations. New situations are coming into being. Europe is not necessarily looking for that Northwest Passage to get over to East Asia anymore. Why? You have this huge land mass and all of these resources that they can utilize in the New World now. Now it's all about what can I get out of, how can I extract and make money and gain power and all those things that I want. How do I get that out of the New World? Well, the new situations, of course, bring about new problems and new opportunities. And that's what we're going to look at next time with the commercial revolution and the Atlantic slave trade and slavery. But before we leave this video, I want to remind you of your weekly literary focus. This is a 2-week assignment. It comes out of Thomas Sowell's book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. It's chapter 3. I'm not going to have you read the entire thing. It's just like the first part of it. But I want you to read his chapter 3. It's titled A Real History of Slavery. As we move into this next section, we're dealing with something that is very explosive, very sensitive today. And I want to be sure that we have a very well-rounded perspective of the place of slavery in the commercial revolution, in this explosion from traditional to modern history, and not just focus on what is common narrative today. I want to challenge you to open your mind a little bit and take a little bit more scope and depth as far as looking into, investigating what is slavery and what is the history of slavery. And with that, I'm going to leave you for the week. Please get all your work done, and we will see you next week. Bye.